All right, welcome to this explainer. Today we're going to look at something truly fascinating, the fundamental blueprint of human interaction. Think of what we're about to cover as a master cheat code for navigating relationships. I mean, whether it's a multi-million-dollar business deal, a high-stakes hostage negotiation, or honestly, just figuring out who's going to do the dishes tonight, we are constantly constructing agreements. Whenever we interact with other people, we're literally building something. And, just like any sturdy building, our interactions require a really solid, deliberate design if we want them to stay standing. So we're going to explore the source material on what is known as the architecture of strategic cooperation. By the end of this, you'll have a highly practical, ready-to-use master blueprint for navigating the immense complexities of cooperative strategy. Okay, let's dive into this. When we ask what this architecture actually looks like, we're really asking for the secret rulebook of human dynamics. Imagine for a second that you're an architect, but instead of steel, glass, and concrete, your building materials are everyday actions, reactions, and decisions. To build a structure that doesn't just immediately collapse under pressure, you need a very specific set of rules. You need a system that defines exactly how we can work together efficiently, avoid mutual destruction, and actually construct something lasting out of our shared interactions. Because, let's be real, as we've all experienced at some point, without a clear blueprint, things fall apart incredibly fast. And that brings us to the groundwork of our metaphorical building, game theory principles. At its core, game theory is essentially the strategic study of interaction, decision-making, and cooperation. It's the math behind asking, if I do X and you do Y, well, who wins? It completely strips away the noise of human emotion and looks purely at the cold, hard mechanics of strategy. It evaluates how rational actors behave when their ultimate success depends heavily on the choices of others. A classic example you might have heard of is the prisoner's dilemma, where two people have to decide whether to cooperate or betray each other, entirely without knowing what the other person is going to do. To build our robust architecture of cooperation today, we're going to extract 4 absolute core principles from this field of study and see exactly how they stack together to form a highly resilient structure. So, we start at the very bottom. The first structural block of our entire blueprint is incredibly simple yet absolutely vital. Be nice. Now, in the realm of strategic cooperation, this isn't just some polite moral suggestion, right? It's a mathematical imperative for a starting point. It means entering an interaction with a baseline of goodwill. You don't defect, you don't cheat, and you absolutely never attack first. Think of 2 businesses entering a brand new partnership. If one starts the relationship by hiding assets or withholding key information, well, the foundation is instantly rotten. If your foundation isn't built on this initial layer of trust, the entire structure of cooperation is compromised before it even gets off the ground. You literally have to extend that initial olive branch just to begin the building process. But what happens when things inevitably go wrong? Because they will. That leads us to the second principle. Be forgiving. Think of this as the flexibility or the shock absorber built deep into the architecture of a massive skyscraper. Earthquakes happen, and let's face it, humans are messy. We make mistakes, we miscommunicate, and we occasionally hit reply all in an email we really shouldn't have. If a building is entirely rigid, a single tremor will shatter it completely. In strategic cooperation, if you hold a permanent grudge after a single misstep, you trigger this endless destructive cycle of retaliation. Being forgiving allows the structure to sway, absorb the shock of an accidental mess-up, and safely reset back to a state of cooperation rather than facing a total structural collapse. Now, what's really interesting about this is the tension we hit right here. We just talked about the absolute necessity of being nice and being forgiving. That represents softness, which is an essential flexibility in any relationship. But think about it. A building made entirely of shock absorbers cannot stand up. It would just collapse into a bouncy pile the moment any real pressure is applied. It needs strength. It needs to resist forceful impact. So we find ourselves at this crucial balancing act in our architecture, because if you're exclusively soft, you become incredibly vulnerable to being exploited by people who just aren't playing by the same cooperative rules. We have to introduce a firm counterweight to that softness to ensure the building actually stays upright. Which brings us to a rather surprising twist directly from the source material. Retaliation is fine once in a while. Just let that sink in for a second. This is the defensive wall of our architecture. If someone continually exploits your foundation of being nice and your shock absorber of forgiveness, you must have the capacity to push back. For example, if a vendor repeatedly delivers late and you just keep forgiving them without any consequences, well, they're just going to keep doing it. Occasional retaliation, like enforcing a strict financial penalty, signals to the other party that your cooperation is absolutely not a weakness. It establishes firm boundaries and enforces the rules of the game. It proves that while you strongly prefer peace, you are fully capable of defending the structure you've built. Without this defensive wall, your cooperation is just an open invitation to be taken advantage of.
Let's move to the final piece and see how this all builds together into our final principle. Be clear in strategy and be consistent. Think of this as the overarching roof that secures the entire structure and protects absolutely everything inside. I mean, if you're randomly nice one day, suddenly unforgiving the next, and unpredictably retaliatory after that, nobody knows how to interact with you. Chaos reigns. But if your strategy is incredibly clear, if others know with absolute certainty that you will start nice, forgive mistakes, but definitely retaliate if pushed too far, they can predict your behavior. And predictability breeds stability. Consistency ensures that everyone involved knows exactly the shape of the building they're standing in, allowing them to cooperate without constantly second-guessing your next move. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole shebang. When we step back, we see the complete master blueprint. Look at how elegantly these 4 highly condensed principles from the source material come together. You lay the solid foundation by being nice. You install the necessary shock absorbers by being forgiving. You erect the defensive walls because, as we learned, retaliation is fine once in a while, and you cap it all off with a sturdy roof by being completely clear and consistent. Together, these aren't just isolated tips or abstract theories. They form an integrated, self-reinforcing architecture that actively fosters long-term, highly effective strategic cooperation in pretty much any scenario.
So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want you to look at your own interactions through this exact lens. Think deeply about your business partnerships, your team dynamics, or even your most personal relationships. When conflicts arise or cooperation inevitably breaks down, examine your blueprint. Are you perhaps missing a foundation of being nice? Do you lack the shock absorber of forgiveness? Are you failing to utilize that defensive wall of occasional retaliation? Or is your roof of consistency leaking? Take a moment to truly evaluate your own strategic decisions today, because the strength of what you build with others and how long it ultimately lasts depends entirely on the architecture you choose to construct.